All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about this incredibly narrow stretch of water right here, the Strait of Hormuz. And believe me, it has become one of the most tense, most strategically vital places on the entire planet. You've got naval forces on high alert, global economies just holding their breath, because this little waterway could be the flashpoint for a massive international conflict.
So, why is everyone paying so much attention? Well, it really all boils down to this one number, 20%. Think about that. Nearly 20% of the entire world's daily oil supply has to pass through this single tiny strait every single day. We're talking 1/5 of all the oil that keeps the global economy running.
So, that leads us to the one critical question that, keeps military planners and economists up at night. What happens if that flow of oil slows down? Or, even worse, what if it stops completely? The fallout, the consequences, they would ripple across the entire globe in an instant.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll talk about why this strait is basically a global economic artery. Then we'll dive into Iran's really unique naval strategy. They call it the asymmetric swarm. We'll put that up against America's naval powerhouse to see the difference. Then we'll look at the geography of the place, because that's super important. And finally, we'll come back to that big question. What if it all just closes?
All right, first up, a global economic artery. Let's really get to the heart of it, why a tiny little strait halfway across the world can have a huge impact on what you pay at the pump.
So the term you got to know here is geopolitical choke point. And really, you can think of it just like a traffic bottleneck on a major highway. It's a super narrow passage for ships, it's really hard to find a detour, and that makes it incredibly vulnerable. If you get one blockage there, the backup is instant and the consequences are massive.
And let's be super clear about this. There are other choke points around the world, for sure. But when it comes to oil, the Strait of Hormuz is the undisputed king. It's not even close. The sheer volume of oil getting funneled through this one spot puts it in a league of its own. And, that kind of economic vulnerability creates a huge military challenge. Which brings us to our second section, Iran's asymmetric swarm. Now, Iran knows it can't go toe-to-toe with the US Navy's massive power, so they didn't even try. Instead, they came up with a totally different playbook, one designed to level the playing field.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. When we talk about Iran's main naval threat, we are not talking about giant warships like destroyers or cruisers. Nope. We're talking about speedboats. These little things are run by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, or the IRGC. And don't let their size fool you for a second. They are packed with some serious firepower. Rockets, machine guns, even anti-ship missiles, and they're built for one thing, to attack in huge, overwhelming numbers. And that's the whole idea right there. The goal is not to have a traditional naval battle, one big ship against another. It's all about using a swarm, just sheer numbers and speed, to totally overwhelm the high-tech defenses of a much, much larger vessel. It's that old idea that quantity has a quality all its own. So what does that actually look like? Well, picture this. The attack is all about speed and surprise. These boats come screaming out of coastal harbors and hidden coves. They close in on a target at insane speeds, hitting it with weapons from all directions at once. And then, just as quickly, they scatter before the big ship can even figure out what's happening and mount a real defense.
Which of course brings us to the other side of this showdown. Section 3, America's naval powerhouse. And let me tell you, the United States Navy operates on a completely different level, with a totally different philosophy and just an unbelievable amount of raw conventional military power.
This really lays out the two completely different ways of thinking. Iran is all about asymmetric warfare. Their goal is something called sea denial, which basically means making the water so dangerous that nobody else dares to enter it. The US Navy? Totally opposite. They're built for sea control, they want to own the seas, to dominate them, and to project their power anywhere in the world.
And when you look at the actual hardware, man, it is a total mismatch. On one side, you have Iran with its swarms of speedboats, its naval mines, and its coastal missiles. And on the other side, the US brings in its carrier strike groups. We're talking literal floating military bases, plus some of the most advanced missile defense systems on the planet, and just overwhelming, unbelievable air power.
But this isn't just about who has the bigger, better toys. The battlefield itself could be the deciding factor. Which brings us to Section 4, the geography of this flashpoint. Because the way the Strait of Hormuz is laid out, well, it changes everything.
And this is exactly why Iran's strategy is so dangerous here. Look, out in the open ocean, an aircraft carrier is a king. It's almost untouchable. But the Strait of Hormuz is incredibly narrow. We're talking confined waters, super short distances. Your reaction time gets cut down to just a few seconds. In that environment, it can actually cancel out some of the high-tech advantages of a giant warship and play right into the hands of a fast, chaotic swarm attack.
So that brings us right back to where we started, to the big, scary question. Section 5, what if it closes? Let's tie all this military strategy stuff back to what it means for the global economy.
And really, this is the bottom line. Even a tiny conflict, a disruption that lasts just a few hours, or even just the threat of one, that's enough to send massive shockwaves through the world's energy markets. But a full-on closure? That would be an absolute catastrophe. We're not just talking an economic crisis. We're talking about huge geopolitical consequences that would be felt in every corner of the globe.
Let's just look at that number one last time, because it truly says everything you need to know. 20%, 1/5 of the oil that powers our world, every single day is completely at the mercy of what happens in this tiny, volatile stretch of water. The entire global economy is riding on this.
So in the end, it all comes down to this one really unsettling question. In this high-stakes game of cat and mouse, this clash between swarm tactics and conventional firepower, all happening in the world's most critical energy choke point, could a single speedboat be the spark that ignites a global crisis? That's the question that hangs over the Strait of Hormuz right now.